Welcome to the second episode in the Ancient Egypt series of Channel Legendarium. Today we'll be talking about a soul's journey to the Underworld in ancient Egypt. The ancient Egyptians, of course, believed that life began and ended with the gods. When an Egyptian was born, they believed that a set of gods called the Seven Hathors presided over a person's birth and set them tasks to perform. Most likely it involved growing wheat so that the pharaoh could have better things to do. After death, a dead Egyptian would be provided with a 78-foot papyrus scroll called the Book of the Dead. Originally, it was provided only to kings, but later in Egypt's history, it was given to any Egyptian who could afford it, so I assume the poor were out of luck. It provided a list of magic spells and maps that guided the dead person through Duat, an underworld which the Egyptians believed lay beneath the Earth's surface. Duat was a frightening kingdom, filled with huge caves, lakes of fire, and magical gates. All these evil places would be guarded by a welcoming committee of terrible monsters, snakes, crocodiles, and half-human monsters with charming names like He Who Dances in Blood. The greatest terror of all was Apep, a serpent god of destruction who ate souls for supper. To avoid these dangers, the soul had to recite magic spells, prayers, and codes found in the Book of the Dead. With these mystical protections, a soul could make its way to the Hall of Manat, the Egyptian goddess of truth and justice. There, the Egyptian would go before a panel of 42 assessor gods. Each one of the 42 had to be approached and addressed by their true name. Said gods had charming names like the Swallower of Souls, the Bone Breaker, and the Eater of Entrails, Yum Yum. Then the soul of the dead person would be asked 42 questions, each one related to a certain sin. They would be asked, did you make someone cry? Did you eavesdrop? Or did you pollute the Nile River? And the soul had to make a declaration of innocence for each of the 42 assessor gods. Now, could anybody lead such a pure life? Well, the Egyptians probably didn't think so, which is why the embalmers put a heart scarab medallion on the heart of each dead person who underwent mummification. The amulets had the words, "Do not stand as a witness against me," engraved upon it. That way, an Egyptian's heart wouldn't blab about the times they listened to their neighbors argue, washed their feet in the Nile, or made their mother cry. At last, the soul would go before Anubis, the god of the dead, who has the head of a jackal, as you can see. Anubis had a scale to weigh the hearts of the dead against an ostrich feather, and if the heart was heavy with sins and crimes, the heart would be eaten by Amet, a monster with the head of a crocodile, the front half of a leopard, and the rear end of a hippopotamus. Sounds like something Dr. Moreau would come up with after drinking some bad absinthe. Now, should Amet feast upon the dead person's heart, it would be the end of the line for them. However, if the heart was found to be light with virtue, the dead person would be taken by Ra to Osiris, who gave souls final approval for the afterlife. However, there was one final layer of godly bureaucracy to get through. A dead Egyptian had to be rowed across Lily Lake by the divine farrier, an always rude man, who the Egyptians had to be unfailingly kind towards. And if they weren't, they got thrown in the water, and what a shame to make it almost to the end of the line, only to blow it at the last minute. But finally, the dead person would meet their ancestors in the Field of Reeds, a place without sadness, anger, and pain. However, there were still chores to be done, and hopefully the dead person would have been given a Ashubai doll that would come to life in the Field of Reeds and help them out with all of the chores that had to be done on their new plot of land in the Field of Reeds. It's worth noting that the ancient Egyptians saw the Field of Reeds as basically being a purified version of the Pharaoh's kingdom, and they saw their kingdom as being the most perfect and most blessed in all the world, and why would anybody want to leave it, even after death? It's worth noting that while the ancient Greeks had lots of stories about great heroes seeking adventure, glory, gold, and sometimes a home in foreign lands more pleasant than Greece, the ancient Egyptians never had any recorded desire to leave their homeland, at least none that they wrote down. And so even when an ancient Egyptian died, they simply hoped that they would return to a better version of Egypt. And that wraps things up for this episode of the Legendarium. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you liked it, please press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. If you've got anything to say, please let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and for the next episode in ancient Egypt, we'll be talking about the most legendary queen of all, Cleopatra.